Evening, Camby. Welcome to an unusual city council meeting. It's really just a work session for the council. Apologize for the 45-minute or so late start. We were doing the performance evaluation of our city manager prior to this, and as you can imagine, 7 city council members tend to be a lot winded when it comes to giving our city manager a long list of things to be worried about and to do. So thank you for staying tuned in with us. So tonight really is a work session to discuss the city. What are some discerning items that we need to hone in on? What might be some future work sessions and things that we need to do? So that's kind of the crux of tonight's meeting. There are a couple of, higher level things that we do need to get kind of calendared or at least cleared up for our upcoming conversation here in a little bit. We do have another exec session after this. And so we will be looking at probably wrapping this up pretty right at 9 o'clock or as close to that as we can. There now you go to the lay of the land for the evening. So discussion items, the first up this evening is to discuss or get an overview of the American Recovery Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA funds. And hopefully everyone had a chance to read the little blurb there in the staff report about that. But Scott, for those of us that maybe didn't read it and the general public, if you could give us an overview of ARPA and what does that mean to the city of Canby for our future planning and conversation.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hodson and Council. Good evening. For this item, I have a PowerPoint I would like to just use so that I can give you that briefing on this issue, and we're going to pull that up real quick. Can you all see that okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through some information. I'll be fairly brief given that we want to move through things fairly quickly tonight. It's again, this is a work session, so the idea is just to hopefully kind of share some information, have a little bit of conversation. We can always put things in the parking lot and bring them back later if you need to. So the idea with this is I wanted to give you an overview. We've only touched briefly at council meetings about the ARPA funding, and we've not gotten into a very much of a in-depth level discussion with council. And so I think what I would envision is this is just more informational for you to kind of get the conversation started. Certainly happy to answer any questions or take your feedback, but I think the idea is that this is one of probably several conversations that we'll be having over time as we unfold this this funding. So with that, I'll just roll through some info. There's a good bit of information on these slides. I won't read it verbatim, and of course I'll be happy to send you all the slide PowerPoints slides so that you can read those more in depth if you'd like. So the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, is federal legislation that was signed into law in March of this year, in 21. It was a $1.9 trillion federal bill that was passed with the intent of supporting recovery efforts in response to the ongoing COVID pandemic. Of this total funding package, $362 billion was designated out of the bill to help states, territories, counties, cities, and tribal governments, and with the intent of things that were supposed to be related to the COVID pandemic, be that replenishing lost revenues, mitigating economic impacts, and various other things. And we'll kind of walk through that. All cities receive direct funding. All cities in the United States receive direct funding through this legislation. Canby's total allocation is estimated to be $3.98 million over 2 years, receiving the money over 2 years. Canby's first of the 2 installments was $1.99 million, and that was received in August. And we have parked that in our bank account, and we have yet to spend any of that money. And we want to determine what the process to go about how to allocate those funds, and that's part of why we're having this conversation. We'll receive a second installment of the same amount next year. It's expected to arrive not earlier than May of 22, perhaps a bit later than that. There's a couple of key timelines on this funding. By December of 2024, the funds must be committed, they must be obligated, which means we have to have a plan for how we're going to spend those by not later than December of 2024. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to have lots of ways to spend the money prior to that. And then December of 2026, the funding and projects must be concluded. So the funding must be spent, the projects have to be concluded by essentially the end of calendar year 2026. So with that, I'm going to walk you through a few slides just to kind of give you a bit more of the details on this. Oops. Okay. So this information I'm sharing with you is based on guidance from the United States Treasury, and these are based on the interim final rules on ARPA funding. So in other words, to the best of our ability, this is the guidance we've received so far from the federal government on how we may spend this money and what the parameters of that are. In the funding bill, Congress identified 4 main areas of use for these funds, and these are to respond to public health emergency, the public health emergency that is COVID and its negative economic impacts, to provide premium pay for essential workers, and that is people that were working in the kind of the front line of dealing with the COVID emergency, to provide government services to the extent of eligible government's revenue losses. What that basically means is we can pay ourselves back for lost revenues. For example, we didn't charge library fines during the COVID pandemic. We could theoretically go back and figure out what that amount of lost revenue is and pay that back. There are other examples. That's just one simple example of that. And then last is to make necessary water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure investments. In all 4 of these eligible uses, the U.S. Treasury prioritizes disadvantaged communities, businesses, households, and nonprofits disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So those are the 4 broad areas of use. And so within each of those, this is just a snapshot of kind of some additional information. So the first one is public health and economic impacts. Identify the need or negative impact from COVID. Identify how the program, service, or other intervention addresses the need or project. So eligible public health uses, COVID-19 mitigation and prevention, medical expenses, behavioral health care, public health and safety, staff, and address disparities in public health outcomes. And then responding to negative economic impacts could be impacts on households and individuals, impacts on businesses, impacts to state, local, and tribal governments, and exacerbation of pre-existing disparities. Again, this is language taken directly from the guidance that we've received. Sorry, I'm scrolling quickly. The next category was premium pay. We should if within this category of eligible use, we should prioritize compensation of lower income eligible workers who perform essential work. Providing premium pay to eligible workers means to help address the disparity between critical services and risks taken by essential workers and relatively low compensation they tend to receive. It must be in addition to a worker's regular rate of wages and other compensation. It may not be used to reduce or substitute workers' normal earnings, and it may be provided, and I think that might be supposed to be retroactively, but at any rate, for work performed since the start of COVID. So in other words, we can go back and pay back in time. Let's see, yes, revenue loss. So this one's very straightforward. Fiscal recovery funds can be used for government services to the amount of revenue decline experienced during COVID. Again, this is something that was a direct impact from COVID, that we lost revenue in any of our services. I gave you the library example. There are others we can essentially pay back those lost revenues. I'll pause. I think Councilor Spoon has her hand up. Do you want me to?
I had a question for clarity, which is that is wastewater infrastructure considered sewer, or are those different?
We're going to touch on that one in the very next.
Okay, thanks.
A perfect, perfect segue. Hopefully this next slide answers your question, Councilor Spoon. If not, let me know and I'll clarify further. So this was the last of the categories, the investment in infrastructure. This one allows for the broad range of necessary investments in projects that improve access to clean drinking water, improve wastewater and stormwater infrastructure systems, and provide access to high quality broadband service. So the water and sewer infrastructure, the bullet points there, hopefully these kind of answer that question. To construct, improve, and repair wastewater treatment plants, to control non-point sources of pollution, improve resilience of infrastructure to severe weather events, create green infrastructure, protect water bodies from pollution, installation and replacement of failing treatment and distribution systems, and Treasury encourages recipients to consider projects to replace lead service lines. On the broadband side, the ability to support the simultaneous use of work, education, and health applications. Eligible projects are supposed to focus on locations that are unserved or underserved, and then focus on projects that deliver a physical broadband connection by prioritizing things that achieve those last mile connections. So kind of finalizing connections to communities. We don't really work in the broadband environment, but we do have providers in our community that do. So there's, perhaps consideration of partnerships. Councilor Spoon, does that give you enough info, or did you want to talk a little bit more about your question?
No, it does. I'll maybe have a related question at the end, but that answers my question. Thanks. Before I turn it over to your questions or your feedback, again, that was just a really high level snapshot of kind of the parameters that we're looking at. But what I wanted to let council know, my thoughts on this are, we've got time. So I want you to recognize that we do have time. We don't have to spend this money by the end of the fiscal year or anything like that. But we do need to get things moving, and we have some things that I think we can already be working on with regards to this. But what I had in mind was, in addition to your feedback, and we've talked a little bit about some of this previously, and there's been some feedback at points in time, but what I would like to do is I've begun the process of working with our staff in our leadership team, our department directors, and I've given them the task of presenting me with proposals that fit within these categories for work that we're either doing or that we need to be doing. So things can be considered for projects that are either underway or going to be underway. For example, let's just say we have a project in Public Works. Some portions of that may be eligible for this funding. So why don't we look at what portions of that are eligible and perhaps apply the funds to that, and then that saves us some of the money that we would have spent, and we can apply that to other projects down the road. Other projects, other initiatives, there are already some discussions that I've had with some of our department directors about, I think, really creative and innovative ideas for things that this will be applicable to, that we already were looking at maybe proposing to council at some point. So we'll look to those things. So what I'm saying is, council, I am going to be gathering input from staff, reviewing that input to see how it fits with the criteria, making recommendations from that feedback and from that list of proposals from staff. And what I'd like to do at some point is bring you a proposal based on some staff recommendations.
But again, I want to fold that in with your own thoughts and recommendations as well. So this is just the first conversation, as I said, of probably multiple conversations where we go through this. It can be an ongoing discussion. We can parse this up over time. We can say, let's apply it to these now, and then let's determine more projects later, perhaps, or what have you. So, but at any rate, that's kind of where we're at right now. I will plan to bring you back some additional, more in-depth proposals of how I think we can spend the money, but I also want to hear your thoughts on that, and of course your questions. So I'm going to pause right there.
So Scott, thank you for kind of fleshing this out a little bit. I know you and I have had some conversation, and I know that there's been some back and forth amongst city managers in determining where is the gray and how do cities dabble into the gray on this matter. So I think that there's still some of that, like we went back on the slides, there's key government speak that I'm sure we could probably spend a half hour talking about some of the words that were used in the language of the bill to determine, define, what important means, or what it define what, key infrastructure relates to, which I'm sure we will have that conversation. My two questions, or one and the same, is, so we talk about, did Camby Fire get ARPA funds, and did Camby Telecom, based on the broadband piece, receive ARPA funds?
Am I unmuted? Yeah. So my understanding is, I know the fire district, Canby Fire District, received. They did so. Those entities did not receive what I'm referring to as a direct allocation. So in this bill, there was a direct allocation to state and local governments. It was basically just spelled out directly that you're going to receive this much. Districts, special districts, fire districts were not included in that direct allocation. However, there is another form of allocation. Actually, there are a number of different branches to this legislation as to how this money is being distributed. But what we received our money from is that direct allocation to cities. There's another piece that went to through the state, and I think went out to essentially to the state legislators, and within their districts, they had the ability to distribute some funds to entities within their district. I believe that Canby Fire received some money from some of that type of allocation. I don't know the amount. I don't know the amount, but they did not get a direct allocation. I think they got kind of an indirect allocation from some of that money. I will note, and we sent it out to you this afternoon. Canby Fire Chief Davis did send us, and I think Captain English is on listening tonight as well. And if you would wish to have me pull him in, we could bring him in. But they sent us essentially a proposal of how they might want us to think about spending money, and perhaps some things that might help the fire district out. So there is a proposal from the fire district, and you can take a look at that as to what their thoughts are.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, and then you asked about telecom. Is that right, Mayor?
I did.
That one I am not sure. I don't want to speak out of school. I am not aware of whether they received any funds, or again, there was some funding through the legislative representatives that was allowed to be allocated. I don't know whether they've received anything through that, and I don't know whether there was a separate piece of this legislation that gave any money directly to telecom. I can't speak to that.
Thank you. Councilor Spoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions. One, in there it said that lead service lines were an approved use. Do we have any lead service lines?
I'm not sure. I can find out. We'll look into
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So that would be one of my asks. To me, that would be a priority. If we have any lead water service lines, that would be a priority. So I'd be curious to know if we have any of those. Second would be, I really appreciate the idea of looking at of projects we have, what portions are eligible. I think that's a great idea. Three, in addition to what staff is doing in terms of recommending use, can you get any revenue loss? Can we quantify that or determine what revenue loss we actually had from COVID? I'd be interested in replacing that. But I'm not sure that I've ever heard, maybe you know, and we've never had the conversation about what actually we're looking at in terms of revenue loss because of COVID. So if staff could assemble what revenue loss we had, I think that would be an important conversation piece too.
Yeah, we're on that one, on the latter part, we're already working on that. We do believe we can quantify that fairly easily, and that seems kind of like, if you want to talk about it, some things in this that are low hanging fruit that are pretty easy to just go and do. That's one of them, and I think we'll be able to bring you that information.
For sure. That seems like an easy, like we should at least replace our revenue loss, but I definitely want to know if we have any lead service lines, particularly if they're water. In terms of wastewater and stormwater, I love that they're included. I know that Camby is unique in that our water and sewer are not serviced by the same organization. And that while we're looking at a new wastewater treatment plant in the future, I'm not sure we'll be spending that money by 2026 in order to have a whole new wastewater treatment plant. But if there's a way for us to do some initial infrastructure on a forthcoming wastewater treatment plant that we could allocate by 2024 and spend by 2026, I'd be interested in hearing what that looks like. In terms of at least our part, wastewater and stormwater, and sewer. And then I guess my final thought is, while I'm intrigued by grants to businesses, I know that there have been a number of allocations already. So my priority in terms of the city would be, replacing lost revenue and then looking at infrastructure and seeing how we could spend the money that way. Those would be my initial thoughts, but obviously very interested in what you and staff think when we look down at it. So.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Councilor Bangs?
Thank you. I also had a question about the lead pipes, so I don't need to ask that again. We had some plans for Waite Park tree removal. Is that already covered from a different, like emergency, like FEMA funds?
Yeah, that's a separate pot of money. That is from FEMA, and we're working on that reimbursement already.
Okay, so then I have some eligibility requirement questions. For example, would we have the ability to provide low-income internet access? I know that at the school district, we provided iPads for all the kids because of COVID. But then we had real connectivity issues with a bunch of families, and that was a challenge to work out. I don't know to what extent it remains a challenge because we're all back in school now. But that is something I'm curious about. We have some water and sewer issues with the community park that we needed to replace. I'm not sure this qualifies. Sewer plant is not quite the same thing as a water and septic system. So I'm kind of curious to know if that would qualify. And finally, the fire chief outlined a number of disaster preparedness proposals, which I like. Would they qualify under these federal guidelines? And those are my three questions.
And I'll answer that question probably the same way I might answer some of the other questions that you might have, which is we're still learning a lot about this. There's still a lot to sort out. And so I don't have all the answers. This is a great conversation, though. These are exactly the types of things that we need to hear so that we can start working on digging into some of this. So I won't be able to answer all of your questions, but they're appreciated so that at least we know where to start looking. And I will say that some of the things that are being mentioned, we're already beginning the process of looking in, but we'll add these things to the list if they're not already on our. If they're already not on our list of things to investigate, we'll add these things.
Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, kind of an overall guiding concept here for this and all of the other funds that we have. You've heard me say it before. The latest is 6.7% inflation rate. That those dollars that we've been allocated are losing value every day. Had an interesting conversation with my ex-father-in-law the other day, who's on the board of directors of Mount Bachelor Village, and they are actually going out to borrow money in order to do their capital projects for the next 3 years. That they think that the cost of borrowing is going to be so much less than the price of inflation. So I think that there is a sense of urgency here as stewards of taxpayers' money, is that we try and get this stuff out there and working as fast as prudently possible. Secondly, I would like to thank the fire district and Chief Davis. I thought those were very reasonable things for us to add, and my suggestion would be almost that it's considered like one of our department head recommendations, that it is put on the table to be evaluated. And finally, I really am interested in hearing what directors have to say. That they know the city on a level that we don't, and if there are some things out there that that we can pull up. For example, as Sarah was talking about, that if we have water and stormwater plans a couple years out, of pulling that in closer, if for no other reason than to get the engineering designs. Those sort of things are very expensive, and to get those targeted. And I don't know whether this is appropriate or not, but with the Camby utility leaving our public works area, really the concept of master planning that area in terms of roads and where future facilities and buildings are going to be needed. I see David's going to be coming up here, and he's got some thoughts on emergency preparedness, which I'd really like to see some money in. But the final thing is, I think this body, or at least speaking for myself, I tend to do best in a situation kind of like an optometry exam of is this clear or is this clear, of getting us some things to evaluate, of giving us the list of what the department heads say, these are things, and then turning it over to us from a policy standpoint of saying these are the areas that we want to try and attack. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Bajorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, obviously my big priorities would be emergency management. I have spoken with Chief Davis a little bit about it myself. So seeing his recommendations is not at all a surprise, and I'm really glad he's brought that forward. I do want to explore that more, and its eligibility. Obviously that's been on my mind since, the fires, the ice storm, everything else we've gone through. We need to see if we can put that on the priority list to get some of that money allocated if we can. Water treatment is basically the next, on my priority list there. So if we can find eligibility for that to move the process forward a little sooner, then that would be ideal. And I do want to see all the other recommendations that are coming forward from our department directors, managers, and see what their input is.
Yep, I think those are all spot on. I think Chief's piece, and I know something that, Scott and I have been talking about, one of the things we'll probably hear from, or we did hear from Chief, and we'll probably hear from our public works director, is fuel storage and how close we came to running out of fuel during, the ice storm. The other piece too, I would like for us to think about as well is we do have the Canby Adult Center is, a building that we own, provides services to our senior population, and when they don't have power, they can't provide much service to those that may be in greatest need. I would be curious to know how could we prepare for, and maybe there's a conversation with Canby Utility on, and that's, I guess, another entity that I would be curious if they got funds of some kind with COVID or with the last disasters that we had. Is there things that we need to invest in from Canby Utility standpoint, from the power standpoint? We were back online pretty quick compared to those residents that were served by like PGE. Did the system, I believe the system worked. There's a reason it's designed the way it is. But is there other small adjustments that can be made or short-term solutions provided for, key pieces to our community to keep power going? Is that more generators? Is that a different generator supply piece? Is that investment in, for example, my building has a huge generator that automatically trips on when power goes off to supply necessary minimal lighting and all power to the HVAC systems, refrigeration, etc. Is that something that we need to look at from a city perspective for key city buildings? I go back to, like the adult center as being one of those maybe pieces to make that kind of an investment in. So, I think you've got, not to be redundant, I think we've got a lot of ideas here and be anxious to see how that comes together here. And I agree with Councilor Parker. The sooner we can start working on those things, the better off I think that we'll be able to stretch those dollars to be a better impact. All right. Great. Scott, thank you for that. Anything else, Scott, on this?
No, your help, your questions and your input are very helpful. I think it's, again, the start of a good conversation. We'll be back to present follow-up and begin the process of giving you some recommendations to consider and how we might want to utilize that. So more to come on this subject.
And the other piece too, Scott, I would be curious what the other city managers, question I like to ask is, what are we not asking? I'd be curious what other cities are looking at and what are they talking about that maybe we're not.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Mayor. I'll continue to converse. There is a network of the city managers in Clackamas County that meet regularly, and this tends to be one of the main topics in what people are doing. So we'll continue to track that. I think that's good.
Councilor Parker, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a little bit of historic perspective on this. When I first got on the council, there was FEMA grants to all cities and counties across the country after 9/11, and we received $11,000. And the only thing the city could think about doing with that money was buying a bulletproof window at our finance department counter. So I always thought that was a poor use of money. Anyway, it sounds like we have nothing but excellent concepts here. So I'm glad to see that you've taken a broad approach in terms of bringing in the department heads. And also, again, many thanks to Chief Davis, because especially during the ice storm, how we needed power and resources and communications, that this is an opportunity for us to invest in.
Okay. Great. I'm going to move us on to item B here, the Housing and Economic Opportunity Analysis Advisory Committees. Scott, I'll let you fill us in on that piece.
Thank you. Yes, I think this will be hopefully a pretty quick and easy one. Planning department, as we've discussed with you, had been very successful in securing some state funds for projects that we have wanted to do anyway. So one of those is we got $100,000 for housing inventory assessment. We got $50,000 for an economic opportunity analysis. So with each of those, the recommendation for the use of those grant monies is to have an advisory committee for each of those two projects. And so staff is asking that in addition to the other appointees on those committees, that there be one council member on each of the two, sort of like you do in your liaison roles with your own boards and committees. These are limited duration committees. So when the project is done, the committee will be done. The Housing Advisory Committee will be about 12 months in duration. Could be up to 7 committee meetings over that time period. Generally, you'd be advising, that committee will be advising on housing, type, affordability, urban growth expansion to accommodate 20-year forecast growth, things of that nature. So we would need one council rep to that, and then an economic advisory committee would be about 14 months in duration, up to 3 advisory committees. So longer duration, but less meetings on that one. And this one will consist of advising on need for employment lands, types of employment, and urban expansion to accommodate employment needs, things of that nature. So that's what we're asking. I believe we're also in the process of asking a planning commission member to sit on each of those 2 advisory committees as well. And then I think there'll be some citizen involvement with those that our planning department will be spearheading each of these efforts. So the question is essentially whether you would have interest in how you might want to go about appointing a representative to each of those committees.
Councilor Spoon, question?
Oh, I was just going to answer his question. I would be really interested in participating in the Economic Advisory Committee. I only have 2 committees right now. I have CAT and I have my neighborhood association, which doesn't meet. And it's of particular interest to me as a business owner. I would also, I would serve on Housing Advisory Committee, but I have a particular perspective because I'm in real estate. So I think that I would be a little bit more objective on the Economic Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you. Council President Hensley?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually did watch the Planning Commission meeting the other night. And so, yes, I believe that Commissioner Heeb is doing housing and Commissioner Patton economic. I would be willing to serve on either one.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments or others that have an interest? Okay. Council, do you have I've got both are interested in both. So we want to flip a coin. Is there a councilor that wants to weigh in? Councilor Spoon, you look like you're about to make a comment?
No, like I said, my preference would be for Economic Advisory because I do have like a career perspective that might influence, in another way. So I think I could be most objective there.
Okay. So Council President Hensley for the Housing Advisory Committee and Councilor Spoon for the Economic Advisory Committee. I'm seeing 1, 2 thumbs up. Any 3, 4, great. I think I have a consensus on those pieces. Okay. Anything else on that topic, Mr. Archer?
Nothing else. Thank you. That's exactly what we needed. So thanks.
Okay. The next topic to discuss is the City Council goal setting retreat. So yeah, this is something We didn't do the beginning of this year. We just couldn't, after much concerted effort, could not land on a date that worked for everybody. The year before, I think we had something called COVID that postponed our meeting. And I think there was also the lack of, were we out of a city manager at that point? I'm not sure totally, but we had some dynamics there. So I guess the question to decide on is, one, do we have a council retreat here as early as we can get one in 2022? That's number one. Number two is, do we do a weekend day, or do we try to do something during the week? That's question number two. And then I think the other item to consider is, we have coming up here and probably in the next 10 minutes is a conversation about a great many things in terms of items that are in process or in discussion or being worked on by city staff. Is this suffice to carry us through 2022 until we get through the 2022 election cycle and move into a new cycle of council and whatnot in the beginning of 2023. So I did have Scott look into and reach out to our facilitator that we had do some pre-work for us in the past. She's still willing to work with us. And so I think, Scott, do you have an update regarding that piece with our facilitator?
I do. Yes. So we reached out to Sarah Singer Wilson. We had engaged her. She facilitates with boards and councils and this is her kind of specialty work. She had actually done some preliminary work for us last year. I think she interviewed those of you that were on the council at that time. And then, I think would probably refresh that. But if you would want to continue to utilize that, I think the idea there would be, we think she would do an excellent job, but also we kind of already made an investment in some of that work and some of the preliminary work. And she also talked to some of our departments and started just sort of doing the initial information gathering. So that maybe that work wouldn't be all lost and for nothing. So she has indicated that her schedule's filling up pretty quickly. A lot of councils and boards do their goal settings at the beginnings of calendar years. And so it's starting to get pretty busy. She is already booked on weekends in January and February. So if we were to use this facilitator, and I presume most of the people that do this work would also kind of be in the same boat. But January and February, the weekends are out for this facilitator. She could do weekdays during those first 2 months of the year. So if you wanted to consider a weekday, we could talk about that. Or starting with March, we could consider weekends with her.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, I thought she was available in February because I would rather do it sooner than later. I think that a goal setting session is paramount to our organization and our goal setting that we want to set up for Scott. So we absolutely, I'm really upset that we haven't been able to do it for the last 2 years. And I think we need to do it sooner rather than later. I was hoping for a Saturday. I know that in the past, we kind of moved that idea to a weekday session because Councilor Spoon was kind of concerned about having to take time off work. But now I think we have a majority of folks who work weekdays. Am I right about that? I mean, we would be asking people to take time off of work to do a weekday. But if people are willing to do that and be able to do this in January or February, I think that would be best. Otherwise, if people aren't willing to do that, then I suppose as soon as we can in March. I think that the soonest place on the calendar we could put a goal setting session, the better. I think that needs to be our priority. We have too many things to talk about. Our list of projects is long. It sounds like there are ideas on the council that want to come forward that haven't yet. And I feel like the goal setting session is the place for that conversation.
Okay. Councilor Sturman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. One is that my hope would be that we can update some of that work that was done with the consultant, even if that comes at a slight additional cost. I think that the conversation she would have with department heads and counselors might be different now than it was a year ago, a year plus ago. So hopefully we can all agree that having an updated conversation is worth it, even if there's an additional cost to it. In terms of weekday versus weekend, I don't think I'm the only person here that works as often on the weekends, maybe even more often as I do on the weekdays. And so I think that it's presumptuous to assume that the weekday is a work day and the weekend is not a work day. I'd be happy to do it whenever we can get it on the calendar soonest. And if that means I have to take a weekend day off, I'm happy to do it. If it means we do it on a weekday, I'm happy to do it. But I think it's kind of presumptuous to assume that the weekday is a work day and the weekend is not, because I know I'm not the only person here that does not work a traditional work schedule. Also, in terms of the agenda items, I would say I agree with everything that's on there, but I would add that I think that one of the most valuable points, we have not had a goal session since 2018. So it hasn't been 2 years, it's been 3 years. But since one of the things that we talked about in the couple of years we did have them while I've been on council is what isn't on our list that we would like to see done. And I think that that's as important of a conversation topic as the items we have listed here, which are things we've already talked about. So I would like to add that to the prospective agenda that does anyone have a goal or an idea, or is there a collective goal we share that we haven't really talked about yet because it hasn't been in the forefront that we can work on as a team? And so I'd like to see that on there as well.
Okay. Councilor Barry?
Thank you. Yeah. There we go. I think we need to do a goal setting session as soon as possible. I'm okay with it. I would typically work Monday through Fridays, but I own my business, so I can move stuff around if I need to. I think it's pretty.
Sean, I don't think your mic's working. It's hard for me to hear you. I just want to make sure.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have it at my head. I think we do need to have a goal setting as soon as we can. I think that it's no surprise to a lot of people that we don't all get along, or at least that we disagree on a lot of stuff. I mean, I think that having a goal setting session to come to some common ground on our council on some things, I think would be a really good idea. I definitely think that we need to do it sooner than later. I am a Monday through Friday worker most of the time, but as an owner of my business, I can adjust that if necessary. So I would love to do sooner than later. If we can't get it on a weekday, then let's try and get the first weekend of March. But I definitely think that at least trying to come to some common ground amongst this council would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Jordan.
Okay, well, first of all, I agree with Council President Hensley. We do need to get this done as quickly as humanly possible, I think. I am a Monday through Friday worker as well, and my first weekend of every month is dedicated to the Coast Guard. So with that said, obviously, if we can get it done sooner during a weekday, I will find a way to make it work. I would prefer a weekend day, not the first weekend of the month, preferably, but whatever works, I'm open to, and we just need to get it done.
Thank you, sir. Scott, maybe what we can do is we can take a look at a couple of dates and maybe formulate a doodle poll that Melissa can send out with some, potential weekday options and maybe some early March weekend pieces to see what comes back. from the group. And we'll try to orchestrate a date. I know, go from there. That works for the group. Okay.
That's great. We'll work on that and get that put together as soon as we're able and out to you. And we'll follow up and get something set up.
Okay. So next item here, item D, city council meeting and work session future items list. So as it's just kind of called out there in the staff report, so items that we've already been kind of working on and are following up on. So items like the 99 connector, so Walnut Street extension, working towards the final design, food cart language in our code, and the planning department's working on that first blush. What street maintenance fee, what we want to do in terms of that regards, park maintenance fee. Again, current parks master plan that we're working on is going to provide a lot of direction on what that could look like from a funding standpoint. We had a great conversation on the urban renewal items. So paying off, a joint meeting with the junior taxing districts, the logging, Malala Forest Road logging bridge, alleyways, road pieces on downtown. So there was a couple of items still in there that we discussed, but need to probably determine if we're going to take those irons out of the fire and work on them. The dog park, Odot tolling update. That was something I brought up, that maybe bringing in somebody from Odot to give us an breakdown and even further talk about the tolling and the diversion aspects that are being discussed, and what is that going to look like for Camby. Swim center renovation, I know we've touched on, but not a lot of dialogue on. Is that something, again, do we move forward with that or not? And then new transit center, again, subject has been broached, but no real, what movement do we want to do? And then there's the non-started or new items. Traffic study, conversation with the planning commission, planning fees, and cost recovery. Strategic investment zone, a breakdown of residential versus commercial properties. SDCs, kind of an SDC 101 class. Economic development policies, revisit the retail market analysis, revisit it, redo it. Lots changed since that last one was done. Bathrooms at community park, personal policies update, finance policies update, CAPRD, again, that's going to be addressed a little bit or significantly in the park master plan. And then, are there new goals or items that we need to add to the list for discussion? So, Councilor Spoon, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple of items. One of the things that I think maybe we can just add, I guess there's not really a place for it, but in terms of the 99 project, which is not the connector, but the Odot project on 99. One of the things we've discussed in the past that I haven't heard brought up recently is that we had talked about adding Camby area transit shelters when Highway 99 was redone, so that we can have dignity in poor weather for our cat riders. And we haven't talked about that in a bit. And I'm not even sure if Scott's aware that that's a conversation we had. I think that was a pre-Scott conversation that as 99 was redone by ODOT, we maybe added some shelters, some bus shelters for our Canby area transit riders. I haven't heard an update on that in a bit, and I'd love to have more conversation about that if that's necessary as part of the project. And then, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in on that one real quick. There is some work being done on that idea. So an update or some discussion, I think, would be very appropriate to let the council know what's happening there.
Awesome. Thank you. The other thing I don't see on this list that has been brought up in a couple of meetings now by me and others is a conversation about how our committee interviews and appointment process works. So I know we've had a couple of conversations about that. It's been brought up. We discussed it maybe being a work session if necessary, but I think that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. So that would be on my list of things we need to discuss. Also, just a question in terms of the swim center renovations. That's been, how long has it been? Like 6 or 7 months since we initially discussed it. Is that not coming back to us until we have another work session? Is there?
So that is, you gave us some direction, and part of that direction included, we reviewed some of the concept plans and some of the costs. The direction we got was to go back and work with the architect on adding a kind of a community room that wasn't included in the original ideas. And we are working on that as we speak. And so when we have new updates to bring back some revision to that discussion, that's what the idea was going to be. Is yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood. So it's that, so the swim center renovation as a work session is the updates that we talked about in the last work session. Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Councilor Bangs.
Thank you.
You muted again.
I wonder if I was unmuted that whole time.
No, I think you just double tapped it.
Okay. So Sarah brought up some of the things I wanted to have added. I know that the Library Advisory Committee is planning on making a work session presentation. I believe there's an obligation that some of these advisory committees do that once a year. And I don't know what the process is for scheduling that, but I know that that's supposed to be upcoming because I know that we have some people working on it. And Sarah covered all the other parts that I wanted to get also added. I was curious to know how many of those items are work session items, because I think maybe I misheard, but I thought that at the last meeting we had discussed doing a work session, and then there was a discussion about how we have like 30 items for a work session. And so are all of these items work session items, or are some of these just regular city council items?
Some of them can be, work sessions that then end up on an agenda for action. Some of them can be done during a city council meeting. So, or in a session much like this, if we've got a light agenda, take care of necessary business, and then, have an item and discuss it and move it along.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I understand it, we're talking about the items in process and follow-up. So for that piece, if we're going to talk about, these are items that are going to end up on an agenda for a work session, hopefully in the near future, right?
Work session or council discussion, like some of these things we've already put into process. So, like we talked about I'm just go back and use the example of the food carts, right? So we know that that's currently language is being worked on by the planning department and the planning commission, and that will eventually come back to us in terms of what's our blush at it to determine how we move forward. Is it what we wanted to see, etc. So that would be something that's in process. So again, I'm going to go back to, those of you, earlier conversations about when, the staff is working on a list of projects, their time is finite. And so if we are looking to kind of bring things in via ad hoc, then stuff shifts, right? So staff and we talked about this earlier, if we need to give direction. And so what are the items we want to look at and provide direction on? Maybe some of these we will never touch in the next 12 to 24 months. That's fine. Staff just needs to know if that's the case, we don't want them item X to be looked at or addressed right now, then great. They'll put it on a shelf and come back to it when we feel that it's important to talk about. They can't work on all of these things all at the same time. Then not,
Thank
we
you for that.
see incremental change, not major change.
Right. Thank you for that. And I agree. So in the items in process list, I see, like you said, food carts, that's coming before the Planning Commission early January, and it's going to come back to us. These are things that are already in the process. I'm going down the list and I come to dog park, final design, location, cost, budget, etc. I would really, really want to see, because Wayside has been bubbling up to the top, as it's been said, but there are other options that are potentially more cost effective and potentially more fast tracked, more timeline effective. So if we're going to have staff go and do the research and figure out what the ways and means are to get it done at Wayside, I would like the information for both the Honda Pits location and the potential of an IGA partnership with the state parks at Molalla River State Park. As I am understanding that there's a meeting about to happen about that conversation. That park's almost done. It's got a bathroom, it's got parking, it's got everything but a fence. It seems like a very budget-friendly option and the fastest way to get it done. So I would like to see side-by-side comparison on all three ideas before we make a final decision on that potential park. As far as the not started and new items, honestly, all of these things should probably be discussed in a goal-setting session. I'm open to hearing ideas and maybe have some feedback on the others' ideas on that. But at first blush, I say if it's not started and new, given how tapped out staff might be, we might want to put that into a goal setting session discussion rather than tonight. But I'm willing to hear others' thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilor Bangs?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would really like to see the community park bathrooms be put on the agenda in January. So I'm not really willing to put that one item on the unstarted items onto a back burner, or to, like I don't want to wait for the goal setting session. It's a small little project, and so I'd really like to see that on a regular city council agenda in January, as I mentioned last week.
Okay. Councilor Bajorn?
Thank you. So I do agree with Council President Hensley that I think we do need to shift some of these to that goal setting session. That would be a good place to discuss a lot of these. One thing I don't see, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun, and Scott, do correct me here if I am. I know we've had brief discussions about some look into some of our emergency management practices and some revisions to that. Is that something that we can do in the interim?
Well, that's something that I think would be a good council discussion. That could be a good work session item. Maybe something to take up in your goal setting. I do have some thoughts on that. We haven't even had a chance to get into that yet, and I think that also might tie back to our discussion about the ARPA funds, that there might be some opportunities there with that type of work. That I've got some thoughts, but I haven't had a chance yet to bring those to the council in terms of some recommendations that actually might come into the budget process for the next fiscal year. And so anyway, I think there's some options there. If council wishes to accelerate that, you can certainly have that discussion. But I'm not sure what the order of that wants to be in terms of the other items you're working on. So I would suggest that falls in line with the idea that maybe there's some things that are out there floating around like that, and other things that have been brought up that would be great topics for what to prioritize on the work program for staff in your goal setting session. So that's, I think, another endorsement for me for your goal setting session. And these are the very types of conversation I think where you want to decide on what your priorities are for having staff spend your city time on.
Okay. Councilor Spoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of Councilor President Hensley's comments regarding the dog park, I would say that council gave direction at the last meeting. I'm not really interested in, sorry, someone walked in my front door. I'm not really interested in staff stretching themselves to do feasibility on 3 different parks when we gave clear direction by vote at the last meeting. But even more so, if there is a multi-agency conversation going on about that, I would like council to be informed. If there's a conversation between the Oregon State Parks Department and either city staff or one of our committees regarding that, I think that it would be nice for us to know about that. I don't know why we weren't all informed about a multi-agency conversation. So I'm not interested in having staff do feasibility on 3 different locations when we gave clear direction at the last meeting, pending clear direction until we get further results from the master plan.
Okay, Councilor Parker.
Yeah, I've got the same sort of question here. I've thought that the council majority has already given staff direction on here, and I'm not interested in doing any scope creep. Scott, I don't remember the council authorizing you to have any discussions with the State Parks Division. What's this about?
So this is not a Scott Archer piece. So 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, maybe, I had a conversation with, back when we were looking at, there's conversation on the dog park piece. There was conversation that I myself with the park board member at the time, Barry Johnson, had with the Oregon State Ranger, Parks Ranger, about Molalla State Park. And, you know, because again, talking different dog park options at the time. And, you know, is there something that could be looked at in terms of conversation down the road? And at the time, the park ranger that was in position expressed that that could be a possible piece to look at, that there was some infrastructure pieces that could be discussed, and nothing more really came of that. And now there's a new park ranger in position, from what I understand. And so I think it's a conversation that is occurring to just see if that's still, if that was an interest piece by the state park group, park rangers, if that was something that could be an option to pursue.
Who would be discussing this with the park ranger?
Right now, I think it was just Barry Johnson was reaching out to see if something could be discussed.
No, this is,
yeah.
I object to this, Brian. We've got people out over the tops. Yeah, we've got people out over the top of their skis. This should come to the city council first. You know, if other people want to disagree with me, fine. But we don't begin discussions with other government organizations without the full knowledge and assent of the council. That's just a bad policy. Do you want each of us out there calling different state agencies and cooking up our ideas? This is not okay.
Okay. Councilor Spoon, did you have something to add to that, or are you echoing those?
I'd like to add to that. In the way that council works, we don't authorize anyone to negotiate or discuss anything on behalf of the city without council authorization. It's completely inappropriate to have even you, Mayor, any of us on council, any of our boards or committees. It's not appropriate for us to go discussing anything or negotiating with other state agencies, any agency at all, without full authorization of the council. I completely object to this without it being fully transparent.
Okay, well, I guess my counter question is, I mean, are our boards and committees not to go and gather information?
That's a completely different question, Mayor. Come on. We're talking about open negotiations with another state agency. If one of our boards and commissions want to have a question answered, then they go through their liaison. The liaison comes to the council and flashes it before the council saying, hey, this is something they'd like to do. Are you okay with it? It's not, this is not the same as going out on Google and trying to find out how many acres you need for a sports park. This is opening discussions with another state agency. I mean, do we have records of this meeting? Are we going to keep minutes of this? I mean, this is not a transparent type of government when we've got people operating independently.
Okay, well, I don't think he's making any sort of deal or he's negotiating anything.
How do we know? Is there going to be a record of this conversation? We don't have any discussions. We don't have any records of the minutes that were held with this soccer sports organization. I can't find any minutes on that. And we had city staff time burned up on this, and also our Parks Committee working on this without the knowledge or assent of the council. And I'm putting my foot down. This is not okay. I don't want this doing it. If you have an idea, if you want to pursue something, come to the council.
Okay, Councilor Majoran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I can see this is getting heated. That's one of the reasons I joined council in the first place, to bring some unity. I see kind of what is being said, and obviously, as the discussion goes around, the dog park, we did give proper action, to staff to decide what to do to get that information brought forward to follow a plan. Obviously, I come from a background of order and discipline. There's a chain of command to follow, and if these discussions are being had outside of city council knowledge, let's bring it back to the table for direct discussion.
Okay, Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One, it's the job of our citizen committees to advise us, and how are they going to advise us without gathering information? I believe that is the intent in this. This has been the intent in the previous conversations, is just to gather information. There's no negotiations that I am aware of that are happening. As far as a record of their meeting, I know that you, Mr. Mayor, are the liaison to their committee and may not be available at their time, being that your work situation. I would be happy to attend any said meeting and take notes if that would appease the council. I think information is a good thing, and we should be letting our citizen committees do their job in getting information that we need. Not all of us are retired. Councilor Parker is retired. The citizen committee member Barry Johnson's retired. Not you aren't, Mr. Mayor. You have to work. So as far as getting notes taken, I'll be happy to step in if I can do that. And I think as stewards of the tax dollars, it is our job to do the best that we can to make the best project we can. And if the nearly finished Molalla State Park is a better project, then we should be exploring it. And if I recall correctly, at the last meeting, we did give direction for staff to explore the Wayside project, but we weren't definite on that as being the end all decision. And if the master plan came back with a different idea, then we could be fleet-footed and pivot. So I think with more information, we can do that.
Councilor Spoon.
Thank you. Yes, what we decided, as in my recollection at the last meeting, was that we authorized staff to do some preliminary work on Wayside. What I'm saying is I'm not interested in then doing feasibility on 3 different parks. Let's save staff time. However, if at any point in time, someone not authorized by city council is meeting with any other organization or state agency, I don't think that liaison is enough. I think that our city attorney or city administrator should be present in order to make sure that we're staying above ground by all means. Not everyone is aware of the limitations what we do. And so I think if we're going to have a citizen committee meet with another state agency, it's not enough to have one of us there. I think that a city staff member needs to be present for another agency conversation. I think that that's more than just a meeting, is more than just information gathering. And so if this meeting is going to occur, my preference would be that either the city attorney or the city administrator be present for it, because we have to make sure that we are not representing on behalf of the city something that should not be represented. And so that would be my ask. I don't know if other city councilors agree with me, but if this meeting is to occur, I think it's imperative that a city staff member be present for it, preferably the city administrator or the city attorney.
Councilor Parker?
Tracy, if you're comfortable having any committee member having a discussion with another government agency, that's your position. For my point, I am not. That the council is the decider, and we have a chain of, as David said, we have a chain of command. That if I gave the example about the Traverso property and where the bike committee wanted to go out and get a grant and hire a consultant. I brought that back to the council and I said, they are going to do that unless you object. Does anybody object? And we didn't. And I returned to the bike committee and they proceeded on this. But I just think this is way outside of the boundaries of our city charter, where all authority resides within the city council. And that, for my position, that if somebody wants to talk to a school district or a soccer association or a state park, they go through their liaison. If the liaison's too busy, call the city manager. But as we had already discussed earlier with this unapproved meeting with the soccer group, they are a for-profit soccer group. By whoever met with them, they suddenly took the soccer group out of consideration because we can't write a contract and then have them bid on something that they participated in that no one else did. So yeah, the city attorney needs to be involved with this. I do not want intergovernmental conversations taking place at a committee level, period.
Council President Hensley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To be fair, Councilor Parker, I didn't say any committee member. We're talking about a chair of a committee. And it was just a conversation. It wasn't negotiations. I don't have a problem with if Scott or Joe have time to attend that meeting. I know, at least in the case of this particular chair, that he has a very clear schedule and he would be able to accommodate the schedules of Mr. Archer or Lindsay. And so I'm fine with that. I'm just saying that if they have the time to do the legwork and bring back information for us so we can make a very good decision on the best project possible for the dollar, for the taxpayers, I want all of the information. And if they're willing to go gather it for us, whether it be by a phone call or a meeting, I'm fine with that. And if Scott or Joe can attend, I'm fine with that. Councilor Spoon, you make a good point. Maybe it shouldn't be one of us. Maybe it should be the liaison plus a staff member so that it's a little more ears on it. And I'm fine with that. I don't have any objection to that idea. But as far as a committee chair seeking out and finding avenues to give us information and are willing to spend their time to go do that and bring it back to us, I can't fault them for that. And they're not making decisions on our part. They're just bringing us information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Robust dialogue for sure. So looking, I said a hard stop at 9:05. We're at 9:07. We've got added items here. Are there priority pieces that?
I guess I would like some clarity on what's going to happen with this meeting. Can a staff member attend? Are we in agreement? Or I know we can only come to a general consensus without voting, but I don't feel comfortable concluding this meeting until we know what the next step is for this meeting between the board chair and another state agency. Maybe Scott can chime in or someone else can.
Are you asking, I'm sorry, Counselor, I wasn't clear what you were asking me there. I mean, I heard what you said. I just wasn't clear with the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have some confusion and frustration about this, and I would like to know moving forward that this meeting will not occur without a city staff member present, unless I'm out of bounds by asking that in this meeting, but I'm pretty concerned about the idea that anyone might be, anyone, it's not about this chair, it's not about that anyone, one of us, the mayor, anyone would be representing anything on behalf of the city without a staff member present to verify and be able to clarify.
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out to the chair of the committee to ask if that's been scheduled or if it's going to happen, that we would be invited to join.
Thank you.
Okay. So what's the council's wish, desire regarding these list of items? I mean, is there a top 5 we want to address? Is there, sorry, Councilor Bangs, I missed your hand go up. I apologize. You're muted, sir.
My hand went up when you initially asked the question. I just want to reiterate, I really want to see in the January meeting, the community parks. You asked, that's the priority. That's my priority. I don't think it's a work session now. I think it's a 5 minutes out of a city council meeting. That's my current priority.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Spoon?
Yeah, I guess my question before I give you my priority list is, what do you see our role in the Odot tolling update? Because I'm not sure that we have much. I'm not sure I understand what our role is in that and how much of a priority it should be. I think none of us are super excited about the tolling as far as my recollection goes, but is it worthy of a whole work session if we don't have a role in it? Or
My thought with that in adding it was having somebody from Odot and give us just a presentation on where it's at, what's being discussed, the diversion pieces that are being looked at, and then do we weigh in? Do we just throw up our hands and say, hey, it's going to be what it's going to be, and nothing we can do about it? Oh, well. Or do we want to try to take, at least some sort of draft a letter of some kind from the whole council stating, to OTC or ODOT or both, or to, our local legislators to say, hey, we're going to take it in the shorts here on this one. 99E is already a bottleneck, and you're going to, is it going to get clogged up more as people try to work around the tolling situation? So it was more of an information piece to add to a council meeting.
Sure. No, that helps me. Then I would say my priorities are our infrastructure is always a priority. So the industrial park to 99E connector final design, I don't know how much of a meeting that is because we all seem to be in agreement about proceeding with it. I'd like to see us address the street maintenance fee and the parks maintenance fee. I know that we're waiting on the master plan for the parks maintenance fee, but I definitely think that once that master plan is in, it has to be a priority for us because the sunset is looming. Our URA items are a priority for me because of, we have these funds, the sunset is looming, but also inflation is an issue. I'm not sure how much we can do with food carts until it's addressed by Planning Commission. I'm not sure there's much of a meeting left there. I think that we were mostly in agreement. And so then I think proceeding I'd really love to talk more about the swim center renovation. I didn't realize it was as much of a question. And then once the master plan comes in, I'd like to proceed with the dog park. So, I mean, those are infrastructure is a priority, but livability as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bangs?
Thank you. I wanted to add that, and I should have mentioned this last week, I don't see a lot of value in the Urban Renewal Agency meeting with the Camby School Board and the Fire Board. The prospects of having 21 of us find a convenient time to meet is challenging. I'm pretty certain that both of those agencies would like us to eliminate the Urban Renewal Fund because those are both tax hits to those agencies. I think we already know how they feel about it, and to have to coordinate a meeting with 21 of us so we can find out what we already know seems to be spinning our wheels. Also, I don't think the dog park is a high priority at this point because I think we've already directed city staff, and I think we're in a waiting period. So, I don't think that's an urgent thing. I think we need to wait for the city to finish that process. And we already said in our motion that we were going to wait until after the master parks design to make a further decision on it. So I don't know if that's a January or February thing. That's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Varwig?
Thank you. Yeah, well, the witching hour is clearly upon us. We're starting to get rummy. I don't think we can decide on any URA stuff in this meeting, unfortunately, because URA is a different meeting. So we'll have to decide whether or not we want to do that work session in a URA meeting, from my understanding. I really do think that this is a great opportunity for Scott to do what we've been asking him to do and really give us the priority list from staff as well, and really try and see what we need to work on between now and our goal setting session, and then really dive into the rest of the goal setting session and figure out what order. Obviously, we can't do all of these in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we are going to have to figure it out over the next year. And so I think that it would be great to hear from staff what has the most staff time already put into it. What do we need to really move forward with? What is our priority between now and our goal setting session, and then revisit the rest at our goal setting session.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilor Bajorian?
Thank you. So I think my top three kind of go hand in hand. The Walnut Street extension, seeing that brought back so we know 100% what our next steps are to get that finished. And then the Odot tolling, obviously. And then this may be an unpopular decision, but the traffic study. It seems like there was a ton of information last time around that we're going to need to hear more about, especially with Amazon coming in. If that Odot tolling goes through, we might have a little bit of a nightmare on our hands. So I'd like to explore that more. And then other items there, the pool renovation definitely kind of has my attention. And then the food carts.
Okay, thank you, sir. Council President Hensley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of the items in process and follow-up are really, truly just updates for us. To Councilor Spoon's point, there's some of these, there's just not a lot that we have decision points on right now. It's just update items. For example, the 99 connector. Of course, we know the Walnut Street connection is happening. I would just like us to be, kept abreast of its progress. And I know city staff is working hard to keep that moving forward. As far as priorities go, Odot tolling update, I think keeping involved in that is a good thing because we know that diversion traffic is going to affect us and we should have a say whether it could simply be a letter. I mean, we might not have a lot of weight, but every voice matters. So I think we should keep on that. I do honestly believe that the dog park situation, we need to make the best of every tax dollar. So I would like to explore, I would just like to see a chart, like Councilor Parker, I'd like to see a chart side by side, timeline and cost for all three ideas, so we can make the best decision for the community and their dollars. As far as the not started and new items, I see there's 9, 10 of them on here. I I have a couple I'd like to add, but I really honestly think that whole section of tonight's agenda is really for the goal setting session. And I really think that needs to happen ASAP. So I don't know what else you want as far as our ideas from this. Hopefully I've answered what you're asking. If not, expand on your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Spoon?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate. I think that we've had enough discussion about the dog park until the master plan comes in. I don't want to put any more staff time into it other than what we've already authorized by majority council vote. But should staff do what Council President Hensley is asking, I don't think cost and timeline are the only two factors. So it would require a much more robust conversation than just timeline and cost. But I think staff has clear direction on that for now, and we'll reassess it once the master plan comes in.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts or discussion items on this piece? Obviously, I think there's generally, it sounds like the non-started or new items need to be put as conversation topics for our goal setting, which we will do a doodle poll and see if we can land on a date to be determined. And then some of these other items to move forward. The traffic study was one, and then the community park bathroom discussion to move up into something that may be more become an item in process. So, okay. All right, hard stop at 9:20. I ran over. Anything else? All right.
I move to adjourn this meeting.
I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Motion's been made by Councilor Varwig to adjourn our work session and our city council meeting, seconded by Council President Hensley to adjourn our work session and city council meeting. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. I will take a motion to move into exec session.
I move that we move into exec session on the other link.
Under ORS 192.660, parent 2, parent H.
Yes, I was just about to say that. Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor of going into our exec session? Anyone opposed? All right. I think I have. The city council will now enter into exec session for the purpose to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. The exec session is held under pursuant to ORS 192.660, parent 2, parent H, which allows the agency to meet in executive session to discuss this topic. All right. Camby, we are going to go into exec session. Thank you for joining us for our work session this evening. We will see you next year. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see you in January.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, Canby.